Imagine a creature longer than a school bus, heavier than a dozen elephants, with a neck that could poke into your second-story window, all while casually munching through the prehistoric equivalent of a never-ending salad bar. That, my friends, is the Brontosaurus, or the thunder lizard. So iconic it spent a full century being scientifically cancelled, only to come stomping back onto the paleontological stage like a proverbial Hulk, smashing expectations and establishing new scientific lore. Confused? Don't worry, you're not alone. The Brontosaurus story is loaded with drama, betrayal, misidentification, a sprinkle of scientific sabotage, and one epic redemption arc. It's part historical documentary, part dino-themed soap opera. So grab some popcorn or ferns if you're in character and get ready for the ultimate prehistoric comeback tour. Let's rewind about 150 million years. You're standing in what is now Como Bluff, Wyoming. But back then, this place was the Jurassic version of the Serengeti. Think giant fern trees, towering conifers, buzzing insects the size of pigeons, and every few minutes, thump, 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 a herd of sauropods casually strolls by like they own the joint. Which, to be fair, they kinda did. This lush subtropical floodplain was part of what was known as the Morrison Formation, one of the richest fossil beds ever discovered. It was home to a full prehistoric A-list cast. The plated Stegosaurus, the sharp-toothed Allosaurus, and the early mammal underdog sneaking around trying not to get stepped on. And in the middle of them all, a Brontosaurus. Yes, no, wait, this just in. It was actually a giant Apatosaurus ajax. This 72 feet of slow-moving herbivore muscle with a neck like a crane and legs like Corinthian pillars, and a tail that could probably break the sound barrier. Its brain, by contrast, could probably fit in a lunch pail, moving at a thrilling 12 miles per hour or 19 kilometers an hour, just fast enough to beat you in a brisk jog, you know, if you trip. But wait, wasn't this episode about the Brontosaurus excelsius? That was lurking among them, perhaps watching from the tree line, waiting for its moment in the fossil spotlight. These two incredibly similar dinosaurs share an intriguing story that is going to take us back to the Bone Wars. Okay, stop laughing. We are serious here. The Bone Wars was a fossil-fueled frenzy of the 1800s that turned dinosaur discovery into a full-blown scientific soap opera. Two rival paleontologists waged decades-long battle, filled with spying, bribery, academic smackdowns, and even dynamiting dig sites, just to stop the other guy from getting the goods. In their rush to outname and outfame each other, they discovered over 140 new dinosaur species, but also left behind a mess of misidentified bones, rushed publications, and a reputation for pettiness that still echoes in paleontology today. Basically, it was an episode of Indiana Jones, where, they were both the heroes, the villains, and from time to time they actually did paleontology. Truly, if you thought academic rivalries involved tweed jackets and mild disagreements over coffee, then you are not familiar with the Bone Wars, a 19th century fossil-fueled feud that had more drama than a full season of Game of Thrones. The main characters, two brilliant but painfully petty scientists, a real odd couple, Edward Trinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh. They had a real Tesla and Edison vibe, but with more fossils and less electric shocks. Born in 1840s Philadelphia, Cope was a self-taught genius who published his first scientific paper at 19. Despite his upper-class upbringing, Cope wasn't content to sit in drawing rooms sipping tea and pondering bones. He dove headfirst into fieldwork, traveling across the American West with little more than a pickaxe, a notebook, and what must have been an industrial-strength tolerance for discomfort. He was intensely curious, slightly chaotic, and obsessed with naming and cataloging life forms, going on to describe over 1,000 new species. He was charismatic, wildly productive, and had the subtlety of a T-Rex in a tea shop. Cope's brain seemed to run on overdrive, and he devoured knowledge the way a velociraptor tears through a buffet line. Born in 1831 in Lockport, New York, Othniel Charles Marsh didn't exactly grow up with a silver spoon. On the other hand, he came from modest beginnings but had an ace up his sleeve. His uncle was George Peabody, one of the richest men in America and a world-class philanthropist, who believed in funding science and education. Coincidentally, his favorite nephew's career, as well as the Peabody Museum. Marsh was the first person in his family to go to college, eventually studying at Yale and later in Europe, where he soaked up state-of-the-art geology and paleontology lessons like a sponge. Thanks to that sweet family funding, Marsh became the first professor of paleontology in US history, and built his own fossil empire from the lecture hall of Yale. At first, Edward Drinker Cope and Othniel Charles Marsh were more friends as two rising stars in the young field of American paleontology, exchanging fossils, findings, and vaguely polite letters. But things took a sharp turn into passive-aggressive territory, and eventually full-blown scientific warfare. After a fateful visit to Cope's fossil quarries in New Jersey, unknown to Cope at the time, Marsh secretly bribed the quarry owners to redirect any future fossil shipments to him. Not exactly something you'd expect from your BFF. When Cope found out about this, he was livid, and the friendship turned into a feud for the ages. From that moment on, every dig, every dinosaur, and every published paper became a battleground. The stakes? Scientific legacy, personal pride, and the right to name the biggest, baddest, and most impressive dinosaurs. The rivalry escalated from underhanded moves to full sabotage, especially during their western expedition in Wyoming and Colorado, hotbeds of dinosaur fossils and dinosaur drama. Marsh's crew, while digging near Como Bluff, unearthed the new iconic Brontosaurus skeleton in 1879. Beating Cope to one of the most complete sauropods of the era. But the tensions didn't end with the fossil bragging rights. Their field teams spied on each other, poached workers, and in some extreme cases used dynamite to destroy dinosaur bones rather than let the other side get them. Yes, actually bone-blasting dynamite in the name of science. This mix of brilliance and bitterness led to a fossil frenzy. Dozens of new species were named, sometimes twice. Data was rushed. And mistakes like Marsh mounting Brontosaurus with the wrong skull became infamous. But through the chaos, both men transformed paleontology from a fringe curiosity into a headline-grabbing scientific spectacle, even if it occasionally blew up in their faces. Although Cope and Marsh may not have been able to agree on a lot towards the end of their career, one thing they would for sure agree upon is that wearing dinosaur t-shirts is the best. If that is something you agree with, come check out our merch store at www.ff3df.com. Now back to the show. In 1879, Marsh's crew hit fossil pay dirt at Como Bluff. They unearthed an amazing, mostly complete skeleton of a sauropod unlike anything they'd seen before. Marsh, sensing a PR gold mine, named it Brontosaurus excelsius, Noble Thunder Lizard. The name alone could headline a rock tour, and its massive frame, towering vertebrae, and cinematic proportions, Brontosaurus quickly became the centerpiece of Marsh's fossil empire. Marsh, ever in a hurry to outdo Cope, slapped a generic sauropod skull, likely from a Camarasaurus that was found nearby, and called it a day. Now, there is some debate on whether Marsh was aware that this was not the correct skull, and at the end of the day, we'll never know. Was it accurate? Not really. Did it look awesome? Absolutely. Science would sort out the details later, right? Meanwhile, Cope was fuming. Brontosaurus was a public and professional win for Marsh, even though Cope had already named similar sauropods like Camarasaurus and Amphicolius. But Marsh had an inconvenient fossil skeleton in his own closet. He had already named a similar dinosaur 2 years earlier, Apatosaurus ajax. And in the ruthless world of taxonomy, the first name always wins. So in 1903, paleontologist Elmer Riggs declared Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus were the same animal. Results? Brontosaurus got scientifically ghosted. After Marsh's flashy debut of Brontosaurus in the late 1800s, the dinosaur quickly became a household name. It stomped into textbooks, museum halls, and even pop culture before anyone thought to double-check the fine print. But as the early 20th century paleontologists began sorting through the fossil chaos left in the wake of the Bone Wars, one major problem became impossible to ignore. Brontosaurus and Apatosaurus were way too similar. So in 1903, paleontologist Elmer Riggs dropped the scientific mic, declaring Brontosaurus was not a separate genus after all, but simply a species of Apatosaurus. Since Apatosaurus had been named first, it took priority, and Brontosaurus was officially booted from its scientific legitimacy. Museums reluctantly changed their labels, sometimes, but the public never got the memo. Brontosaurus, with its thunderous name and impressive figure, stayed stubbornly alive in the hearts of fans. Despite being kicked from the scientific spotlight, Brontosaurus refused to go extinct in the public imagination. It appeared in the Flintstones, on the Sinclair oil signs, in coloring books, plastic toys, cereal boxes, you name it. even in Jurassic Park, despite trying to be scientifically accurate, could not fully let go of Bronto's blockbuster potential. Museums kept displaying Brontosaurus skeletons even if they were quietly labeled Apatosaurus, and the public didn't care. The name was too iconic, too cool, and frankly, too thunderous to ignore. Now we're gonna fast forward to 2015. Paleontologists Emmanuel Schopp, Octavio Mateus, and Roger Benson analyzed an impressive 81 sauropod specimens. Armed with modern tech, metric tons of fossil data, and a mission to settle a century-old dinosaur debate, they launched one of the most detailed dinosaur studies ever attempted. The goal? To figure out once and for all if Brontosaurus was actually different enough from Apatosaurus to deserve its own name, or if it was doomed to be forever a footnote. Using advanced statistical analysis, 3D comparison, and hundreds of anatomical traits, we're talking vertebrae, limb bones, and neck shapes galore. They pored over the sauropod fossils like forensic scientists at a prehistoric crime scene. And the results? Plot twist, Brontosaurus was back! It had enough unique skeletal features to finally escape the shadow of the Apatosaurus, making the Thunder Lizard's comeback official, scientific, and gloriously overdue. What they found was dino-sized mic drop worthy. Brontosaurus was different enough from Apatosaurus to be considered its own genus again. The key difference in the vertebrae structure, neck shape, and anatomical features made the case. Brontosaurus was back after 112 years in scientific exile. The Thunder Lizard was vindicated. It wasn't just a pop culture icon anymore, it was real again. The Brontosaurus story is really a lesson in how science evolves as new information is found and new studies are conducted. Paleontology, like all fields, is built on curiosity, correction, and comebacks. Hypotheses are proposed, tested, supported, disputed, and sometimes brought back from the grave like a resurrected fossil version of Star Trek. Marsh and Cope, for all their flaws in fossil-fueled fighting, helped launch a golden age of dinosaur discovery. Their rivalry gave us hundreds of new species, filled museums with incredible specimens, and turned dinosaurs into pop culture icons. And Brontosaurus? Well, thanks to hard-working scientists like Riggs, Schopp, Mateus, and Benson, we are ultimately reminded that no theory is ever truly set in stone, and sometimes it just takes a few more bones and a fresh pair of eyes. So here's to the Thunder Lizard. Born in the Jurassic, misnamed in the Gilded Age, cancelled in the 20th century, and revived in the 21st like a Mesozoic legend, showing us that the only thing more powerful than its tail was, well, its tail. Well, that's it for today, Dino fans, so if you like stories like this, make sure you click that like, subscribe, hit that notifications button to make sure you don't miss a single episode. You're still here? Well, you must really love dinosaurs then, so make sure you check out our web store. We have lots of amazing new t-shirts, including specialized Brontosaurus t-shirts just for this episode. Come check us out at www.ff3df.com.